Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. Here, 3 Weird World viewers give true accounts of their experiences with alternate realities, or what one calls matrix glitches. Quite unexplainable, these strange experiences pose the question of whether parallel universes exist quite close to our own realm of reality. Andrew wrote to us about something exceedingly weird that happened to him that day. He frequently visits Brazil, which is his wife's native country, and on that particular day he was walking through the centre of her hometown, where the main shopping street is pleasantly closed to traffic. Less pleasantly so, many of the street-level shops in one section have not reopened since the pandemic and remain shuttered, with their metal gates down. That day, a local youth orchestra was playing under a large tent in the square. A woman in front of Andrew was filming the performance with her smartphone, and he couldn't resist glancing at her screen. What immediately jumped out at him was the background. He distinctly noticed the sign for his wife's favourite specialty chocolate franchise called Cacao Show, which sells a tasty vegan chocolate bar. Normally, Andrew doesn't recognise many Brazilian brand logos, but this is one that he does, so it really stood out for him. He thought that he might surprise her by buying one. When he looked away from the woman's screen, however, the shop with the logo was nowhere to be seen. He glanced back at the woman's screen, and there it was, in the background and directly over the conductor's right shoulder. He shifted his angle, just in case, and looked back and forth from the real storefronts to the woman's screen, and then noticed other differences. He even looked behind the audience to see if it might be a reflection, but there was nothing remotely resembling the images on her screen. In the images that he was able to view, more stores were open, and there was more colour in general from promotional signs and the merchandise on display. Then the woman put down her phone, and he was left mystified and frustrated, and asking himself many questions. What had he seen? Where was the store? And what was the source of all the sudden colour? What could he have possibly mistaken for the distinctive logo? He wondered if the woman's phone was a window into an alternative reality. In retrospect, he wished he'd asked the woman if she could share the video or let him see it, but decided that that might have been seen as inappropriate. Peter. During the late noughties, Peter lived in West Gorton, Manchester, England. During the 4 years he lived there, every Sunday he would get the bus to the city centre to eat his midday meal in his favourite cafe. The cafe opened at 11:30 a.m, and usually after a long lie-in on Sunday mornings, it would be his first meal of the day. One lovely spring morning in 2008, he left his flat at around 11:10 and walked the 4 minutes to the nearby bus stop. Not unusually for a Sunday, there was nobody about, just the odd car passing, but no one on foot. Peter says that the bus service in that area was, and still is, notoriously bad, and the timetables basically works of fiction. During the week, it was often the case that no buses would come for upwards of 30 minutes, and then 3 would arrive at once. It was even worse on Sundays when, instead of 3 buses, 1 would arrive packed. So on this Sunday, Peter waited and waited when after some time he noticed a young girl at the pedestrian crossing which was left of the bus stop. He hadn't seen her get to that position, she was just suddenly there. The tall, thin girl with black shoulder-length hair looked about 14 years of age and was dressed in colourful but shabby clothing, and she was looking very agitated. Then she noticed Peter and walked hurriedly towards him. As she got closer, he wondered if she was maybe Romanian or Turkish, and for some reason he remembers that she was wearing open-toed cork-block heel sandals. "Polizi," she said twice, whereupon Peter asked if she was wanting the police. "Yes, polizi," she replied. With Peter feeling famished by this time and anxious for the arrival of his bus, the last thing he wanted was a dramatic situation requiring action. He points out that in England every bus shelter has a map of the local area, so he drew her attention to the map and attempted to direct her to the nearby police station. However, the girl persisted in seeming to demand that he do more to assist. "Polizzi," she repeated, and he asked her what was wrong. She replied, "Last night, Mama, Papa, go out, not come back." At this point, Peter could see the bus in the distance, so he desperately looked around for someone who could be asked to assist, but there was no one to be seen. So one last time he drew her attention to the map, but she was still not interested, and by now she was becoming tearful. The bus was now getting very close, so Peter started looking around again. Then began a very strange sequence of events. Behind him and to the right of the bus stop, there was what's left of a side road that is now blocked off by the Hyde Road Wheels and Tyres building. There he spotted what seemed a very dull and uninteresting old car pointing in the direction of the city centre. All 4 doors of the olive green car were wide open, and there were 2 police officers walking round the empty car and looking in. Peter was astonished, not only that the girl hadn't noticed them, but also astonished as to how on earth it had got there. If it had passed him, he would have noticed it slow down to park, and if it had been going the opposite direction, he would have noticed it do a U-turn. Another strange aspect was that the police were wearing flat hats, and yet there was no police car. At that time, the usual protocol was that beat police wore helmets and police in cars wore flat hats. Peter pointed out the 2 uniformed cops to the girl and said, "There, Polizzi." He then put out his hand to signal for the bus and looked back to see the older of the 2 officers put his arm around her shoulder and say, "What's up, love?" By this time she was audibly crying. Then, just before the bus stopped, he looked again and the girl was seated in the centre of the back seat of the car. But strangely, all the doors were still open and the 2 officers were still walking around the car looking in. Peter then got on the bus, which was packed like sardines, paid his fare and stood at the front, where he again turned round to check what was happening. Gone. The girl was gone, the police were gone, and the strange green car was gone. He says this could not possibly have happened in the few seconds it took for him to position himself on the bus. He has since read that the word polizzi is Azerbaijani for police, although he stopped looking after he found this out, so it could well be the word for police in other languages. The police uniforms were not out of place for the time, as they were a 2008 design. While he has heard of parallel universes and time slips, Peter has no personal theory about this bizarre event. Amanda. Amanda says that she has experienced many of what she calls matrix glitches. One occurred when she was waiting to see if her sister was a donor for a bone marrow transplant. It had been quite a process, with lots of delays. During that time, her mother received what she thought was a phone call or voicemail wherein the person on the other end was saying that Amanda's sister was not a match. But then after the message finished, her mum couldn't find the voicemail or missed call in her phone. Happily, not long after that, they received the call that her sister was a 10 out of 10 match. Amanda saw this as a timeline glitch. In another strange occurrence, she was in her kitchen and had just let her dog inside. She then suddenly saw him at the door again, as if she had never let him in. In another of her odd matrix glitches, she was at a wedding and a table that was at the front was suddenly several feet away from its original spot within seconds. She looked away, looked back, and it had moved.